Hey everyone. So today I thought I'd do something a little bit different and take you through an overview of how I would typically coach clients if they were working with me specifically to deliver a keynote. Although a lot of the tips and the ideas and the concepts that I'm going to be sharing in this presentation is applicable to whatever form of storytelling or public speaking you might be doing, whether you're speaking on panels or coming up with ideas for content on your social media or even just putting writing out there for what you might want to be sharing to build your personal brand. So I'll go through these slides. Just a note to have in your minds is that this is an overview, so it's not going to go into as much detail as if I were working with a client one on one, because everybody's story is different, everyone's starting point is different, and everyone's comfort is different when it comes to your public speaking skills and your exposure to different storytelling ideas and your stage presence and your speaking style. But let's get into it. How to deliver a memorable keynote. So, first thing we want to clarify is what is a keynote? So, keynote is a speech where there's usually a single speaker who is the main speaker of a conference or an event, and they talk about their life, a specific topic, maybe it's an industry topic, or they have a call to action for the audience. So, they have an idea or a behavior change that they want to propose to the audience that they think is important, and they are a leader and a thought leader in that space so that they have a presence and following for their ideas, and they have a lived experience that really backs up that main idea within their speech. Now, the difference between a general keynote and a memorable keynote is if you think about some of the best speakers. So, right here, I have a photo of David Foster Wallace, who gave, I think, one of the best commencement speeches ever called This is Water. You can look it up on YouTube. Um, a memorable keynote feels like a conversation between the speaker and the audience. You could be a speaker who is talking to a room of 3 people or talking to an auditorium of 300 people. If you have the ability to engage and draw in your audience emotionally to the point where they feel like you are speaking directly to them, sitting where they're sitting in the audience, that's when you know you've delivered a memorable keynote. Because when an audience member feels like the message that you have is a message specifically for them, you've hit an emotionally resonant chord. And if you want to be a well known speaker, if you want to build up your audience, and if you want to develop your personal brand, you can't just be sharing information that people can find anywhere. You have to be a memorable person so that when someone wants information about your topic, your industry, what you gave a speech about, the person that pops into their heads is you. It's not just a random Google search. It's not some other influencer or speaker or industry leader. They think of your name. And you can only achieve that if you become a memorable speaker, where they remember you and your brand above the topic that you're talking about, or they directly correlate you and make a connection to the idea that you're presenting. So if you want to be the person who's known for healthcare, they'll think of your name when they think about healthcare equity. Or if you want to think about business, or that you want your name to pop up when they think about business ideas. But again, you can only reach that point and connect with people in that way if you are able to deliver information that helps them, that educates them, but if also you are a memorable speaker in their eyes. So, in order to be a memorable speaker, we have a few objectives. The first thing, and I think is the most important thing, is to center the audience. You, as a speaker, are there to deliver value. You are there to connect with the audience. And when I say value, I want to be very clear. I don't just mean giving the audience stuff where it feels like a transaction, like giving them information or giving them the answer to a question that they have. It's also sometimes giving them a good feeling, or it's giving them a new way of thinking, or it's unlocking something that they've been wondering about that they couldn't quite put into words themselves, but they've been feeling for a long time. So value comes in different forms. And you, as a speaker, your definition of value will be different depending on what you're talking about and what your audience wants. But when I say center your audience, you have to really think about, what does your audience want? What is your audience there for? Who are they? What are their pain points? What do they want? What are their dreams? If you know that, then that influences all of your speech. It influences the topics that you bring up, it influences the structure in which you present them, and it influences the ending and the outcome or the call to action towards the end of your speech. But again, we have to center our audience and really think of the audience as our friend and the people that we want to connect with the most. The second thing is to communicate insightful information. Information is everywhere. If you want to know about anything, you can Google it. It's pretty easy. You can get the answer to your question within a few seconds with a quick search. And it's really important for us to share insightful information. I want to emphasize that word. Insights means you've experienced something and you made an interpretation and you developed an insight about that thing, whether it is a topic, experience, or a certain subject. We want to know, how do you think about this? How do you feel about this? And that insightful information has to be peppered all throughout your talk. Again, the third thing is to be authentic. So this ties into being insightful. Is if we know how you think, then you're being yourself and we're being authentic. If you reveal to us how you process this information and how you got to the point where you are now in thinking about it, then you're being authentic with us and we feel like you're more real as a speaker. And again, this also ties to the connection piece. We naturally gravitate towards good energy, towards people who we feel are being themselves. And it also gives the audience permission to really dive deep into your story because they feel like they can be themselves as an audience member if you're being truthful as well. We want to melt away the barriers and the walls of audience members who might be a little bit skeptical about our topic or idea, or are were dragged to your talk for some reason, but it wasn't their initial interest to come see you speak. But we want to melt away those guards by being authentic. And that's something that any person will resonate with, no matter what you're talking about. We also want to make an impression. And this can be done in a few different ways. It could be the topic that you're talking about, it could be the vulnerability that you express on stage and the memorability of the content of your stories, or it could also be the energy that you bring. But we want to be remembered for a few different things when we're giving our talk. We also want to engage and be present. I can't tell you how many times I've been to a talk and the person speaking just seems like they don't want to be there, or they seem like they're unprepared and lazy in giving their speech, and nobody wants that. You may have stage time, and I think that stage time is sacred, but there are so many people out there who get stage time but they're not engaged and present with their audience or with the moderator, and it just makes it a bad experience for everyone, because if you don't seem like you want to be there, why would the audience feel like they want to be there either? And I think the last objective is something that is the holy grail of any speaker or influencer or public persona. It's to influence behavior. So, can you get to a point where what you're saying and what you're sharing and the story that you're exposing to other people, can you use those things to get people to change? Can what you say help influence behavior? Because that's when you've really landed a memorable story. Is people don't just remember you in the story, but they start using your words, they start repeating your ideas. Whatever you shared on stage for 10, 30 minutes, it's now a part of their life and it's influencing their minds and it's influencing behavior. And that's the holy grail. Is we want to develop emotionally resonant, memorable stories that are so sharp and so connective that people actually change because of what we said. Now we're going to talk about what to know before writing. So Storytelling, writing your speech, giving a keynote can happen a few different ways. Most people like to write things down. I know that I like to write things down. And sometimes the writing part can scare a lot of people, especially if you're preparing for a talk. It can be scary to know what to write about, how to structure it. Writing is a messy, iterative process that requires numerous drafts if we want it to be really, really sharp. Never have I met a keynote speaker or a writer or an influencer who hasn't had to go through the struggle of writing things down, practicing it, rewriting in order to get to the point where they're delivering something that's really, really impactful. This is something that everyone goes through. So, one thing that I like to remind my clients is preparation is key, and never underestimate the amount of preparation it actually takes to deliver a really sharp talk. You might be on stage for 12 minutes. That could take days, weeks, months of preparation to get that talk the sharpest possible. And you have to be ready to be writing things down and then throwing it away and then rewriting, trying it out on stage, saying it out loud, and realizing that it doesn't come naturally when you're speaking. It doesn't, the words don't feel right in your body, and then going back to the drawing board and then doing it again. But the things that you can do is be really clear about what your topic is. So, what is the main topic that you want your talk to revolve around? Do you have clarity about what it is? Why is it important? And what you want the audience to take away? And also tell us what makes you someone who's credible to talk to that topic and to give us information about it. And again, you want to know your audience before writing. This is something that I touched on earlier. But if you know who your audience is, if you know the person, the people in attendance, and why they're coming to see you speak, you can craft and tailor the language that you use in your keynote so that it lands with your audience members. You also want to know how much time do you have on stage? If you're speaking at a conference, summit, or exhibit, you want to ask the planners, how much time do I have on stage? Is there a place where I'm going to be seated backstage or close to the stage so I know how long I have to get there? When does time actually start? What's the event happening before in mine? What's the event happening mine? So you know that if there are any logistical things that you have to keep in mind, that you have buffer time to prepare for those experiences, especially if you're talking to at a big event where you might have to be mic'd up and travel to a certain room in the venue. You want to be there early so that you have time to get mic'd up, make sure that audio is working, and be comfortable on stage, maybe spend some time around it and get there early. But again, you want to know how much time your actual speech is, but you also want to know how much time you have or need to prepare for what you have to do before and after your keynote ends. Last thing is, before writing, you want to know, is there a Q&A or not? Do you want, if there is, do you want to script out some answers for common questions that you think will be asked during the Q&A? If you opt out of a Q&A, does that mean you have more time for your main talk? These are all things that we want to consider and all things that we take with us before we even start writing. Once we do start writing and we start to get into the flow, how do we craft memorable content? One of the ways that we can craft memorable content is to write about one honest thing. Again, if we want to tell memorable stories that are emotionally resonant and land and connect with the people who are listening, we usually are better off at achieving that if we focus on one main idea. So tell us, what is the main idea of your talk? Even better, make that main idea something that all humans can relate to. And all humans experience a field of emotions. We all experience anger, sadness, disappointment, need for connection. We all value those things. So when you think about the stories that you want to tell and the main emphasis of your keynote, what is that big theme that we want to build around so that by the time our talk ends, our audience members know exactly the point that we're trying to make and what we were really bringing to the stage and trying to teach them about. When we're talking about this one honest thing, we want to also be clear and concise, and we want to state facts. And those can be facts from our lived experiences, and those could be facts based on data and research and ideas and concepts that we know to be true. Another way that we craft memorable content is musicality. We never want to be monotone on a stage. I find that speakers who are monotone and are successful speakers usually are a transactional speaker. And what I mean by that, it's usually a speaker who specializes in a specific area, and audience members go to see that speaker because they want that thing that that speaker has. They want transaction in the form of information. They want to know how they built the business. They want the answer to fixing their marriage. They want the information that that speaker has. It doesn't matter how they deliver it, they just want the information. That's what I mean by being a transactional speaker. People want the thing from you, and once they get it, they're done listening to you. And that's why they're okay with listening to a monotone speech. It's just they want that information, and that's it. If you want to be a memorable speaker, a beloved speaker, if you want to be someone who's liked because of your personality and your ideas, I don't know too many speakers out there who haven't achieved that without delivering some sort of tonal variety and musicality in their speeches. These are people who are on fire and energetic during their speeches and on stage, and you can see that there's a difference in the way that they speak. They hold tension and take pauses when there's a conflict in the story. They get loud when there's a big emotion, and they get really low when they want their audience members to listen. This is something that we want to incorporate throughout our own keynote speech because it's something that grabs attention. You want to almost think about your musicality as like emphasis on your words. You're bolding and you're italicizing and you're underlying and you're capitalizing words. And we do that through our musicality and our tonal variety as we're delivering our speeches. The last thing is we want to develop a story arc. So our brains, human brains, are naturally wired to remember stories. It is something that has existed for thousands of years. It is a natural way for people to communicate with each other. The short form videos that you see on TikTok and Reels on Instagram, and even this YouTube video, it it's such a new way of communicating with other people that we can consume this content, but to be memorable and really to get our brains to wire in a way where we can receive and interpret the information that a speaker is telling us, it has to follow some sort of story arc and story narrative structure. So we want to take the audience on a journey with us as we're speaking from beginning, middle, and an end, and make that ride as exciting as possible for our audience members. When we talk about the one honest thing, again, this is part of what makes memorable content, is the one honest thing is what you create your whole story around. So imagine it's 1 week after your speech. An audience member is in her home Sunday morning on a couch with their dog, they're sipping coffee, and they recall your speech because you were such a memorable person. What is the one thing you want them to think? When the words come up in their brain, like, what do you want to be known for? What's the idea? What's the lesson? What's the value? Is it how to love other people? Is it spend your time wisely? Is it choose yourself and bet on your dreams? Like, what is the idea that you want that audience member when it's 1 week after your speech to remember about your talk and remember about you? You know, this is the bet on yourself woman. This is the go for your dreams guy. This is the person who talks about XYZ. When we think about our legacy and memorability in our public speaking, what is that idea that you want people to latch onto? And again, this is what we build our whole talk around. We want to be known for this. So, your aim during a speech is to embody that one thing and deliver it with conviction and to not break your character. You're almost embodying that value as you're spending that time on the stage. Musicality, we talked about this. A story is like music. It's not just what the audience hears, it's their interpretation of the piece. So, are you able to deliver a talk that is memorable enough where some time later a person is repeating your words? Maybe they latched onto a phrase or a sentence during your speech that's really impactful with them. We want to aim to do that as we're speaking. And we can do that again through tonal variety, through specific phrases and taglines. If you have a great tagline that is a quick, memorable idea, definitely throw that into your speech. And we want to incorporate that and repeat that so that it really imprints on the brains of the people who are listening. So this is a depiction of the story arc. I'll go over this, but you can see it starts off slow, it builds. That's where we have most of our content, and then it slowly helps the audience back down, and we all land gently on a fluffy cushion, and we have a neatly packaged idea towards the end. This is just one form of the way you can approach your narrative structure, but it is the most used form, and I think it's an structure that most people can really understand and follow. So when we talk about the story arc, the beginning of your story is where we start to set the scene. And this is where I like to encourage clients to really speak in the present. So if you are talking about relationships and you have a really good snippet of a story from your marriage, let's bring that into the present. So it could be something like, I'm holding our baby on our living room couch. It takes us right to the present. It paints a picture of this person's life. They're a parent. They use the word our, so we can assume that they're in a relationship. But see how even structuring a sentence in the present immediately immediately takes the audience in with us so that they know we built a whole new world now. We're not in this auditorium. We're not in this coffee shop. We're not in this conference venue. We're in my living room. Speak from the present and give us some details into the kind of story that you're going to take us through. So sometimes you can start with place, sometimes you can start with age and date. Age and date actually tends to be something that's overused. So if you can, you know, if it's not necessary, let's try to get it more creative with that. Usually people say like I'm 5 years old. Great, but let's paint the environment a little bit more. We can talk about the age and date of your story a little bit later. But again, present tense, short sentences, sensory imagery, emotional detail. We want to start off with that, and that will create the foundation for our story. Here, where you see this arrow pointing upwards, this purple arrow, this is the vertical takeoff. So this is when things start to get really interesting. Usually, vertical takeoff happens when there is some sort of conflict that happens. And emotions intensify. The imagery gets a little bit more vivid, more detail. So we started off in a place. In my original example, I'm holding our baby on our living room couch, and then maybe a conflict is introduced. So, and then suddenly I see my mother's favorite mug shatter on the floor. Like, boom, conflict. Like, we just take the image that we just created and we change it, or we create a contrast through new inner dialogue. So it doesn't have to be conflict. Usually is. It usually keeps things more interesting. That's usually how lessons are learned. Is we have some sort of conflict in our lives and we learn from it. But tell us what that vertical takeoff is. What is the interesting part of your story? What is the reason that we're listening? And once you introduce that, we usually have an obstacle, challenge, or problem to solve. This is similar to if you've ever read Campbell's Hero's Journey. This is very similar. There is something that us as the speaker has to go through, and we experience conflict from it, we experience setback from it, we experience challenge from it. And here is where you want to pepper in your keynote with either one or a few different example stories of what you went through to overcome this challenge. And as you are going through these events, we also want to know what your internal processing and your internal dialogue was as you were experiencing these events. That's how we add dimension to the middle of our story. Is we want the external world and we want the internal world too. Tell us what happened, tell us what you felt. Tell us what happened, tell us what you felt. Tell us what happened, tell us how you dealt with it and how you felt about dealing with it. And that's all the middle chunk of your story. And this is where we get to play with musicality and vocal variety and tone and all of those fun things that add a lot of emphasis to our story. The ending is when we start to wind down. It starts to get a little less exciting and calm the nervous systems of the listeners and of the speaker. So we start to reach some sort of resolution and we share the lessons that we learn from these experiences. And here is where we might want to add a call to action for the audience members or share an example of a way that we changed and then invite the audience members to change in that way as well or to think about changing that way. Again, this is part of the influencing behavior piece. But as you can see, this is a simple structure that lands well in the brains of people. We have a setting, we have a vertical takeoff, conflict, 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 and then we start to scale back down and we deliver a resolution towards the end of the keynote or the talk. The art of storyboarding. This is something that I think is really fun, but I know is painful for a lot of clients, and I can totally understand. But the point of storyboarding, what I mean by that is if you have an idea for a theme of your talk, you'll probably have a few different mini stories that you think will serve as good content for your entire keynote. But it's always kind of a weird process choosing which stories you want to include. So, storyboarding is just writing all of those little snippets down. What are your ideas around your lived experiences or examples or data and research that you think could emphasize this main point that you want to focus your whole keynote around? And the idea is to get everything down on paper or in a digital format, however you like to work, and just write out all of those stories one by one. What happened there? How did you feel? And almost have different paragraphs that describe each of those stories in isolation and give us as much details as possible. Again, use the tips that I shared in the previous slide, and make it relatable because you never know who the audience members are be if you are talking about a specific subject or topic or a niche industry. We want to go in with the jargon that we typically use in the first draft, but then we want to sort of rephrase all of those things and edit them so that they're more relatable to a general audience. Um, but the thing is to write it all down and have it so that we have all of our these ideas at our disposal, because what will start to happen as we're developing our keynote and speech is sometimes one of these stories will definitely use and it'll make it into the final speech. Sometimes we'll use part of a story and then the half of another and then a third of another, and then it'll create a section in our keynote. And sometimes one sentence within this, one sentence within a specific story will serve as a foundation for an idea that will spark others. But what we have is a toolkit of different stories. And the thing about a toolkit is you only grab the tool that you need for the moment. You don't use them all at once. And as we start writing our story and drafting and then redrafting, we'll start to figure out what tools do I need to really hit the nail on the head for the point I'm trying to drive home, and what tools can I set on the back burner. They're good tools. Maybe we'll use them for another keynote or speech, but right now, these are the tools I need. So think of your stories as different tools in your keynote toolkit. When you have all of these story snippets written down, now we want to start finding your themes. And usually we have a guiding light for what our main theme is based on the main objective that we have about what our keynote is about. What is our main keynote topic? But When we start to build out the story, you'll start to see that there will be natural themes that emerge based on the stories that we gravitate towards as we're writing our speech. So once we storyboard everything, we might have a specific topic in mind, and then we say, okay, these three stories that I storyboarded actually fit this main theme the best. And maybe you have a lot of clarity about why that is, and maybe it's just like a gut feeling that these are the stories that will resonate the most with my main goal in giving this keynote. And you'll start to write your story down, and themes will start to emerge, common threads will start to emerge. And you can more easily discover these themes when you let go of assumptions. There are many speakers who try to develop the skill of more emotionally charged storytelling, more vulnerable storytelling, and they have a framework in their mind about how the speech should go, how things should tie together. But great writing, great storytelling, it's an art. So let go of your assumptions and just follow the feeling of the story. And that will eventually give you these themes that will resonate with your audience members. And it'll give you these common threads. And you'll start to see that there'll be certain sections of the story that naturally flow into each other, and you'll start moving things around. Um, and then we also want to always ask ourselves, why does this matter? Like, investigate the reasons why we're attached to certain parts of the story, investigate the reasons why we think that this is going to work, and really ask ourselves, what are the assumptions I'm making about what these stories are and what they mean? And are those assumptions true for my audience members? This can be a really hard thing. This is where a lot of speakers get stuck, because sometimes you lose the North Star for why you're writing this speech, or why you were invited to give a keynote, or what someone asked you to talk about. And the best way that we can sort of reorient ourselves and not get confused in the drafting process is to ask ourselves, why does this matter? Why does this matter to me? Why does this matter to the audience members? Why is this an important point that I'm trying to make? And once you filter all of your stories and your themes through these questions, then the really poignant points will start to emerge, and that will be part of your final speech and your final keynote. When we're arranging our keynote, we sort of follow something similar to the story arc that I shared earlier. So, first part is your starting scene. We're in the present. We develop a compelling hook that brings the audience members in with us in the moment of our story and where it starts. We share our observations. What did I see? What did I feel? How did I think about this moment as I was experiencing it? And then we add different inner dialogue and scenes towards the middle, where we again see the external world that you were experiencing and get a glimpse into your internal world as you were processing these events as they were happening. And then maybe we want to throw another supporting event in there. And the supporting event can sometimes be projected out into the future or the current moment, or it could be a memory from the past. But thematically, it'll connect to the stories that make it into that middle section of our keynote. And then again, of course, we want the ending. How does this end? Is this a call to action? Is this a lesson learned? Is it a value that we developed? Is it something else? What is the influential piece that we want to share towards the end of our keynote? Again, this arranging your keynote and storyboarding, it's the messy process. That's why people like to work with coaches, because it can be really hard when you have all of these ideas floating around in your head and trying to piece together this perfect narrative that fits into 12 minutes when you have all of these ideas that are jumbled around. Like, the arrangement and the drafting process is really messy, but it's also really fun, because you don't know what ideas will lead to what, and what will start to pop up for you when you're in the drafting phase. Made this point already. A note on story arrangement. It's supposed to be messy. I accept that process. It's an art. Have fun with it. We're digging into deep stuff here, and we're composing talks that we hope other people will find valuable. And there's no way to get to that without it being a little bit messy. Practice makes progress. This is a quote that I really like. There from Mark Twain. There are only two kinds of speakers in the world: the nervous and the liars. It's normal to have stage fright. It's normal to feel a little bit uneasy as we're giving a speech. It's uh, being on stage delivering a keynote. It's such a weird thing, like to be one person on a stage and have like hundreds of people staring at you while you're on this elevated platform and the only voice that you hear is your own. It's weird. Like it almost feels like you're getting attacked, like people facing you. Like, so just know that this is all normal. And it can be really nerve wracking because you're not always getting feedback. You're one person talking for a long time. You don't know what other people are saying. You might not be able to hear how they're reacting to it if you're on a stage that's far from the first row of the audience. But the way that we can calm these nerves is to practice, practice, practice. So read that speech out loud. It's one thing to write things down, but how does it feel when you say it? Is what you wrote down words that you would actually use if you were speaking? Does it feel like your natural speaking style? Most people have a difference between the way that they write and the way that they speak because we were taught how to write in school and we might have adopted these fixed ideas around what it means to write well, but it could be drastically different from our personalities and how we would speak in a conversational format, which is what a keynote is we're sharing information and we're teaching in some ways, but we're also in another way peer to peer with the audience members because we want to connect with them and be approachable and seem approachable and authentic. So read that out loud, see if the words that you wrote down feel right to you and sit well in your body. Rearrange and edit again and again and again. Get feedback, whether you're working with a coach or you're working with a trusted friend or partner, and getting feedback about how things are landing and how ideas are being received by other people and what your energy comes off as you're giving this speech. Incorporate the feedback that feels like it is supporting how you would like to deliver the keynote. Not all feedback is good feedback, but if it feels like you are receiving feedback that will actually enhance your talk, definitely incorporate that, and get some help in how to do that if you want to feel comfortable with how the rearrangement of that goes. Um, Take as long as necessary. Obviously, this is not always possible, but treat it like an art form. You're writing, you're creating, you're developing a speech that's to be shared. This is an art piece. So take as much time as you can possibly take. Let ideas settle, take breaks, because again, when we're in the mode of writing things down, especially if it's a speech and a keynote that is really important to us, or we know that the audience members are people who are really important to us, we want to take breaks because we want ourselves to settle and relax in the process. Take a break from the writing, and usually when we give ourselves time to rest, that's when better ideas come, and then we can go back to the drawing board and incorporate those new ideas into our speech. If you're working with a coach on your keynote, again, there is this feedback loop where you can get feedback on the story arc, the audience impact. A really good coach will tell you, this is how I received you when you said this line, or this is what resonated with me the most as another person, or I felt like you were not really present as you were saying this. Like, is that the point, or is that the energy that you're trying to project? And then you can also get feedback on your true voice. When I work with clients, we go deep into their writing. I ask for things that they've written before. I study speeches that they might have given in the past that are recorded, so I can get a sense of what their natural voice is actually like, so I can see whether or not the story and the keynote that they're working on now matches who they are and how they've presented in the past. So this is all good feedback that we can get as speakers, so that we make sure that our keynote is emotionally resonant and feels like us as we're giving it. What makes a great speaker? This is a big question for a lot of people. It's something that a lot of people wonder about. And it really boils down to a few things. And these are the questions that many people have is how do I be more confident? How do I be more concise? How do I express emotional intelligence? These are all skills that make a great speaker. It's no wonder that people ask questions about it. If you're confident, if you're concise, if you're able to engage and react to the room, if you've crafted your story in a way that you know is curated for the audience who will be listening, if you bring a lot of energy and enthusiasm, if you're self aware and authentic, and we feel like we know you, and you are taking up room on the stage, and you're using your body well, and you are not letting us know when there's a mistake, and you're keeping an even head, and you're calm and grounded as you're speaking. These are all things that make a great speaker. You know, if you know your story well enough, and you've practiced and practiced and practiced, and you've received feedback, and you get to the point where I've got this. Like, even if I forget a word, even if I forget a section, I know my main objective and my theme so well that I can adjust on the fly. I've done the work. I've done the internal digging to find the right stories. I know where I can hit on these themes. I know where I have to pause. I know what part of the stage I want to end up on when I hit this specific sentence. I know what my face is going to look like when I deliver this point home. These are all hallmarks of a great speaker. And we can get to all of these things by learning them and practicing each of these bullets so that we can deliver our story in a way that feels most natural to us. So, something that I would want to pose to you is how would you rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 for each of these things? And if you think that you are a low confidence speaker, but you're a very perky and upbeat speaker, maybe you have high energy and enthusiasm, those are great pieces of information to know, because then you know what you need to work on. Like, maybe you're a great writer and you know your stories and you know how to tell authentic stories. Great. But maybe you don't know how to take up room on a stage as much and walk around, and that's less comfortable. Then we know that the thing that you want to put more emphasis on is working on physical presentation and stage presence. If we know where we want to work on and what areas we can improve on the most, then we have an idea of how we can dictate our time and energy towards focusing on those specific things so that by the time we get to the stage, we come across as a well rounded, engaging, amazing speaker. Tips for memorization. This is a fear that a lot of people have, is like, what if I forget? What if I forget my line? What if I forget that specific hand gesture when I want to say this sentence? What if I really like this phrase, but I forget to say it? I'm going to beat myself up. Don't worry about it. Again, storytelling, keynote speaking, it's about energy. Are you giving us the information and the energy that we want as audience members? Even if you make a mistake, if you don't attract attention to it, your audience is not going to know. Like, how many times have we been an audience member and somebody on stage says, oh, like, I messed that up, or I forgot that line? Like, we don't need to know that because we didn't know before. Now we can't stop thinking about how you messed up about a thing that we didn't know you messed up about. As the speaker, you don't have to acknowledge those things because the audience is not going to know unless you tell them. So it's better that you just take a breath, pause, ground yourself again, and not tell us you made a mistake because we didn't know in the first place. But if you want tips on memorization, we want to engage all the sentence. We want to read what we wrote. We want to rewrite it. We want to record it on a video or on a voice memo, and we want to listen to it over and over again. And if you are doing those three things at the same time, so if you recorded your speech and then you're writing it down as you're listening to it, or you're reading it as you're listening to it, when we're engaging multiple senses at the same time, it helps with memorization because we're enforcing it with all of these different parts of our brain, our listening, our writing, our our writing. What's the word that I'm looking for? Our mobile ability. Can't find the better word. But when we're engaging multiple senses, it just helps reinforce our memorization a little bit more. Um, and again, we want to at least like a few times record your keynote in the tone and musicality that you think you would like to give it on the day of your actual event or speech. Record that and listen to it in the morning when your brain is fresh, when you're out for a walk. We want to listen to it over and over as if it were a song. You know, think about your favorite song or your favorite music and how the lyrics come naturally to you. The lyrics come naturally to you because you've listened to it over and over again. So you know the melody, you know when the chorus is going to come in, you know when the beat drops. The same goes for when we write speeches and keynotes. Is if we record the speech with the tonal variety and the musicality that we want to deliver it in, it becomes like a song. And when we listen to it, then our brains will naturally start to latch on to the format and the structure and the lines that we hit on, and it'll just be in the back of our brains. So listen to what you record and play it in the background so that you can get a sense for how things are going to go. I can't tell you how many times this has saved so many speakers where a client will tell me, like, I totally blanked out on minute 4 of the speech, but it's like my brain went on autopilot and I just took a breath and then the next sentence came to me when I thought I forgot everything that came after it. And it's because it's in the back of their brains because they put in the time to record and listen to their own speech. If you are able to practice in a simulated event space, great, because if we can get used to the external settings of the venue where we're going to deliver our speech and we're comfortable there, great. If you can't get access to the venue, try to simulate the space that you are actually going to be giving the speech in. Even if you're in your house or apartment and you're holding a mic, if or a mic is in front of you, just like practicing your body language when you're in your preparation phase so that by the time you get to your speech, you've already somewhat trained your brain and your body to deliver the speech in real time because you've practiced it and you've simulated it. Um, Public speaking can be really stressful for a lot of people. So, of course, pay attention to your sleep, nutrition, and stress. Get a good night's sleep before the day of your talk. I usually like to tell people to not rehearse too much the day of your speech. And this goes into the point of take breaks because your brain responds to novelty. If we have put in all of the time and effort that we can to building this speech and practicing it, we want to give our brain a break because our brain is not going to find it exciting if we've pummeled it with this speech over and over and over again. But if we relax on the day of, we make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and our bodies and our stress, then our brain will naturally pick up where we left off and find it exciting again because it feels new. But we have to be intentional about taking that break so that our brain will go into recall and figure out how to deliver the speech in a as engaging of a way as possible. So my final thoughts here are, again, storytelling and speech writing is an art, not a science. It's supposed to be messy. The fun is in the mess because you're creating something that's never existed before. And how fun is that when you're just creating? Like someone is going to be listening to you talk about things that you find exciting based on ideas and words that you put together and created. Like that's cool. And it's supposed to be messy. Like all art is messy. Others will react and judge what you say, so you might as well speak your truth. If you are in a position where you are mic'd up on a stage and you have people listening, do not waste your time talking about things that do not resonate with you personally. We will feel it. We will sense it as audience members that you do not care about this. You are just regurgitating information or you are acting like a message board. But if you tap into yourself and tell us your truth, we receive you as more authentic. We engage with you more and we remember you more. So always, always, always use your speaking time to tell us your truth. Tell us one honest thing about you. Tell us about how you felt. Leave a little piece of yourself on the stage. Last and final thing is be present in your words. connect with your audience, talk to them like a friend, and focus on what you can control while you are speaking. When it comes to the day of your speech and you've done everything that you can possibly do to deliver the best keynote possible, you're done. Your only job, once you step foot onto that stage and the first word comes out of your mouth, is to be present, have fun, and be there with the people who are listening to you. Those are the best things you can do. And I think you'll find that if you stick to those concepts, you will become a memorable speaker. You will live in the brains of the people who listen to you forever. And you will be more well known because of it. And it'll lead to more speaking engagements. It'll lead to a bigger following. It'll lead to more business. And most importantly, it will lead to more confidence in yourself and your ideas and belief that what you have to share is something worth sharing. So I hope that this rundown of the coaching process was helpful. If you did find it helpful, I have some more videos in this YouTube channel. Until next time, take care, everyone. I'll see you.